and then we'll make a start. So it's lovely to meet you all, and there'll be an opportunity to have proper conversation going forwards with this during the conversation and during the webinar. So good afternoon and welcome to the latest instalment of the Community Wales webinar series. Today we turn our focus to arguably the biggest threat to some and the greatest opportunity to others in a generation, which is artificial intelligence. AI is becoming a topic discussed more and more in our listening conversations across the North, with very divergent views offered by residents from coast to coast. AI is a topic particularly embraced by the younger generations, we're finding. So today we welcome Tom Robinson to discuss what impact AI is having in education. Tom is a head of computer science and business studies at Bede Academy in Blyth, Northumberland. And it was at an AI conference where Tom was speaking that the idea of this webinar was born. Tom spoke with such enthusiasm, clarity, and realism that it made perfect sense to continue this conversation in this format. So the first question to Tom is this. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. Why do you think today's conversation is so important?
Hello, everyone. Like James has said, I'm head of computer science and business at a school over in Blyth. I feel like we're at a stage now where this conversation needs to happen. AI is prolific. You can't go out of your house without hearing about it. There's a huge variety of experience out there, people who know what it is, people who won't touch it, and some people in between who kind of want to dabble a little bit and see what it's about. One of the greatest impacts that we know for socio-economic deprivation is education, and it follows suit that AI would make its way into our schools, and so it has at varying different rates and stages. So I think to make sure that we get ahead of this and we've got a good handle on the facts and the myths of this is a conversation that needs to happen.
Thank you very much, Tom. A good start. The first question is a very simple question, but it's a question that too many people don't know necessarily the answer to. And that question is this: what is AI?
So when we're looking at AI, the misconception, and just as a bit of a caveat, I'm no expert on it. There's little parts of AI that I know about that's very contextual to my role in a school. So by no means are you going to get some Silicon Valley expert here, but what you are going to get is a kind of boots on the ground idea about how it influences our students and the teachers within the buildings that we work in. AI is not one thing, it's a collection of programs. When people refer to AI, what they're usually referring to is the generative models. And again, I apologize if you already know this, but just so we're all on the same page, effectively, those large language models are trained on patterns. Software combs the internet, combs reports, images, all manner of statistics, and it looks for those patterns the same way that if you imagine freshly laid snow in a field and somebody walks across it and you see their footsteps, AI will just continue to follow those footsteps. It will go the routes most traveled. And this can be really helpful. It can be really helpful because what happens is when somebody asks it a query or a prompt, if you haven't heard that term before, which is when we effectively ask AI a question, it will come back with a very, very majority heavy answer. So those people who've been looking for certain things before you and have come up with a solution that they're happy with, you will get the same solution back. Now, the problem with this is that it relies on a number of things. It relies on what is the quality of the data that's actually been fed to it to train this, and is it what you're looking for? You might be that 1 out of every 100 people who isn't looking for the 99% majority. You might want that one tiny little different thing. Well, it's not going to feed you that because that's not what it's designed to do. So effectively, it's the path most traveled. AI is a collection of software that looks at patterns and gives you the majority vote.
Thank you very much. It's it's an impossible question to answer in many ways because it's such a vast open topic that everyone has very different opinions of. One question you can definitely answer with some sort of clarity, I think, would be this. So what does AI actually look like in a modern classroom?
Well, we were very scared of it when it first came around, to be quite honest with you. It blew up very, very quickly. There's not been many things to this rate that we've seen, especially when it comes to software and the development of software like this. It was a very strange benchmark where you can see the progression of AI that started with a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti a number of years ago, and it was awful. You could tell it was looked like bad CGI from a very, very budget film, but nowadays it is almost picture perfect. Now, within our classrooms, the thing that everybody needs to know about and everybody talks about is this idea of homework and this radical use of AI by students to get past the work that they don't really want to do. Now, AI is just a tool in the same way that a calculator is a tool. In the same way that I have conversations with staff and they say, well, is AI not cheating? Does that not mean that students now don't have to do any work or do any thinking for themselves? It's a very similar idea to the calculator when it first came around, and it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve an answer very, very quickly, it can be a very, very powerful tool. If you're trying to find some research, again, very powerful tool. But the misconception comes when actually what we don't want to rob from our students is the thinking and the process of making those neurological connections in their brain, the actual process of learning where they've got to struggle themselves and think about solutions. If AI is robbing them of that experience, that's when it becomes a problem. So we do see it. We do see it in classrooms. We've seen it in homeworks. I've spoken to some other centres who come to us for help, and unfortunately, we've seen it in coursework and we've seen it in other areas. And now we're quite lucky in my centre because we wanted to get ahead of the game. I come from a big group of nerds and I'm surrounded by them in my department, and I mean that only with the greatest of respect. So we wanted to get ahead of this. So we knew that there were certain things that we had to put in place to make sure that people understood that it's here, students have access to it. What can we do? What can't we do? And how do we make sure they're on that straight and narrow?
Yeah. So what AI tools are students using today? Like what tools do you allow them, if you will, to use, and how do you ensure that they are using their mind, their neural engine, if you will, to actually, develop as an individual, as a human being, as a student, and not just going for the lowest common denominator, but like as you related to earlier, the calculator thing we were always told at school, you can't use a calculator, you won't be able to use one in real life. So how do you rather ensure that this is used as a tool for education and for learning rather than necessarily a shortcut?
Well, we realise that this isn't something we can contain. We realise this very, very quickly. It's not something that we can just effectively say, don't go home and use AI. You're not allowed to do that, because there's that curiosity. When you hear that there's an easier way to do that, easier, efficient, it depends on how you frame this. There are a number of things. That can actually have an impact on our students and make it actually better for them. When we're conducting research and we're conducting coursework and we're looking at different statistical analysis, this can be fantastic. But what becomes really powerful is that checking. This hasn't changed. There are certain things that we still need to check and use our professional judgment in to quality assure. Just because AI is available, it doesn't mean that students are going to lose that aspect of their learning. 10 years ago, they could have gone home and they could have done research on the internet and still copied and pasted from Google. Well, that hasn't changed. It's become more accessible, but that hasn't changed. Many, many decades ago, and still to this day, if your friend has done their homework, you can have a copy of that. And again, that whole narrative hasn't changed. So it's all about quality assurance. And what we do using our professional judgment is we find different ways to do that. We ask them questions. We try and dig deeper. We really try and identify what are the things that we need to know. And we can do that in the classroom. That's why that face-to-face is so important. Yes, we've got that work that they do in their own time. We've got the coursework, we've got the revision, which we hope that they're doing independently as well. But realistically, the profession relies on us having that professional judgment, making sure that we're ensuring that students are learning what we want them to learn, and they're learning it in a way that isn't, as you put it, the lowest common denominator. It isn't just the low-hanging fruit. It's efficient when we want them to be efficient, but really they're building those cognitive skills to be able to formulate their own solutions. And again, that comes from classroom checking, making sure that they really know what they say they know.
No, I couldn't agree more. I guess on the other side of the coin. So what AI tools are teachers using? Because there must be a very big opportunity here to lazy teachers can make a lot of shortcuts, should we say. I'll give you one quick example. I put into ChatGPT my old dissertation that I did when I finished university, and I asked it to basically mark it for me, and it marked it within 4 marks of what I actually got. And then I told it this was actually put in like 2012, whatever it was. And I then said, oh, with that context, the bibliography, the sources you used at the time were actually a lot more relevant. And they bumped me up by 4 points. And guess what? That's exactly the score I got from the university itself, which scared me, frankly. And I'm thinking, a teacher could look at this and think, my marking suddenly become a lot easier. My homework planning or my lesson plan has become a lot easier. How do you A, guard against that, and B, how are teachers using it to benefit both themselves and their work-life balance, but also the education the students are getting?
So what we're seeing is that it's a bit of the Wild West at the moment, or at least it was before we came in and decided that we wanted to write a policy on this. Again, in the same way that we don't want to remove students from AI, because that's the world they're going to go into. Staff are already in that world. They're in industry now where there are other staff members using it and utilizing it well, and there are some staff who aren't utilizing it well. And the same thing that will help our students will also help our staff, which is quality assurance. As a lead in my department, I need to make sure that I'm doing my job, quality assuring my staff. And it's not necessarily looking at every single thing that they're doing, because I trust them and I give them a level of autonomy. But I need to make sure that the resources that we are producing are high quality. And effectively, staff know what I need them to know. So in regards to how do we direct staff to using AI effectively, that's why we came up with this policy. I've been given the opportunity to be part of an AI policymaking group for our trust. And that's where we looked at things and we said, what can we use this for and what shouldn't we use this for? There's a moral obligation here, very similar with the students. What should I be using this for? And what do I know is just plain wrong? So it's interesting that you said about marking, because that was how this policy came about. I have a member of staff who was teaching one of his non-disciplines. He's got a computer science background, but he was ended up teaching business A level. We needed it for timetabling, and I knew he'd be good at it. And he came to me and he asked me if he could use AI to do some low stakes marking. It was for homework sheets, and he wanted to make sure that it was turned around with a very reasonable level of accuracy. And he couldn't do that. He didn't have the skill set. He didn't have the content and knowledge to do that at that current point. So we put in some parameters. We needed to make sure that first and foremost, the answers that he was getting were high quality. AI can get it wrong. It's the best pattern. And if the pattern is incorrect, it's not going to be beneficial to him, to the students, or to the wider department. So I asked him to make sure that we could train a model. Now, for those of you who might not know terms like models, you can effectively have an isolated part of an AI system. You can decide what information to feed it, and it will base a lot of its answers based on that. So I asked him to train a model that was based solely on this one section of A-level business. And we fed it specifications, past questions, mark schemes, and we fed it as many questions that we'd quality assured and marked ourselves as possible. And we wanted to refine this model. Now, on top of that, we didn't know what the outcome of this model was going to be. We just knew that we're feeding it high quality information. I asked him to mark 3 pieces of work, and I asked AI to mark 3 pieces of work to make sure we were within tolerance. We then blind gave this to another member of staff who was a business specialist. I didn't want her to have bias against or for AI. So we said, we've done 6 pieces of work. Could you please quality assure it? And they were well within tolerance, 1 or 2 marks. Now, the big parallel thread running through all of this was that my member of staff had to be upskilling at the same time. If we were going to do this, it wasn't a substitute. And this is where things can start to fall apart. And we're seeing this in industry. I'm lucky enough to have a sibling who's actually in cybersecurity, and he works with software development. And there are parts of the industry that are not faring well because of AI utilization in there. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. We can get onto that later. Within school, however, what we can do is we can direct staff. We can use it as a tool. So we used it as a tool, and we came up with a bit of a pro forma. And when the students had this work marked by AI, it would give them a breakdown of the different assessment objectives. And long story short, for every piece of homework, if I asked my member of staff to deliver the same level of that, it would take them 45 to 50 minutes to do that. It was unsustainable, but the quality was high. Now, the last little part of this, AI checking it, which we've made sure was working, making sure that my staff were upskilling in the process, was making sure that it was quality assured. We never give out blind information to students or to staff for that matter. So once he'd got all the sheets, it wasn't a substitute for his time, but what he could do is spend a fraction of that time quality assuring, reading through what AI had produced, thinking to himself, is that something that I would write down? Is that information that's in the right format? And doing spot checking as well with a trained member of staff. What we found that there was very, very good results, not only from the AI model, but also well received by students. And as a side note, we made it aware that this is what we're doing. Depending on the year groups, there will be a different level of, what's the best word to use? A different level of response to AI. If you ask the year 7 students, much younger students, they will say it's cheating. If I ask my sixth formers about it, they're sick to death of it. They are absolutely AI'd out and they are saturated by the whole thing. So directing and leaning in, I think, is the best part to come back to your original answer. Directing staff and quality assuring them at higher levels with leaders quality assuring, as we have done for years. And that's the thing. AI has been built up into this idea that it's this magical, wonderful thing. It will do all your work, but actually it's just another tool. And if we see it like that and we can utilize it well, it can be a very powerful one.
It's a fantastic answer, and I couldn't agree more, Tom. And I think you are perfectly placed to kind of ensure that this new revolution is led by students who understand how to use it best at the beginning. Because I've met certain colleagues and staff members who don't really know how to use AI, and they use it as a shortcut. They just get the first answer they see and think that's good enough, and then you look at it and thinking this hasn't been written by a human being, because they think it's a shortcut. And I think to have that ability to use it as an actual tool as part of your armory to really develop and upskill yourself and how you're working, it is so important. So keep up the good work, and thank you very much, Tom, for that, because it's much required from what I can see. You have an opportunity now to open it up to the floor. Is there anyone on the chat who would like to? Helen's straight in there, look at that. Helen, please take yourself off mute and firstly introduce yourself and then say what you need to say or what you'd like to say.
So I'm Helen Andrews, Community Connected for Thriving Together. We support the VCSE sector, but I'm doing an apprenticeship actually through work for AI. So this is why I was really interested in seeing how organisations are using it. I was wondering, because I've learned that Claude and ChatGPT large language models are not really secure, and I just wondered what you teach with the kids, like using Google Gemini, if they use the secure ring fence systems, or Copilot's got quite a ring fence system. And I just wondered, is that something you've been teaching them? And hallucinations as well. I better ask you about any hallucinations.
So we do this massively, and it's one of the things that we need to make sure is kind of paramount, especially within education and young people. The first and last word is safeguarding. That's what we look for. So actually it becomes more of a hot topic with staff to make sure that any sort of information we can get a handle on very, very quickly. In regards to the students, we make it well known, and again, I'm oversimplifying here, but the fact that all information that they take and they upload is potentially being held somewhere and being used to train another system. We know that these systems are being developed all over the world, and effectively these large tech companies are getting as much data as possible so that they can refine theirs. I mean, I don't want to go too far down the tinfoil hat zone, but you've got to be aware of it. In the same way with the staff, we have an absolutely no personal data rule. If they're asking for large amounts of data to be manipulated, or they want to mark any student's work, no names. We made sure they're anonymized, even in basic way. Instead of names, student 1, 2, and 3. I don't want any personal data on any system. We have the educational license for ChatGPT because it gives us the option to do those models in a way that really benefits us. That being said, I still don't trust it. And it's one of those things that better safe than sorry. So even with that, with a tech company saying, well, you know, it is an educational thing, we promise, you know, cross our hearts sort of stuff, that, you know, no data will be used. We just make sure that we err on the side of caution. So no personal data whatsoever gets uploaded. We also reiterate this to students because they found that it's very easy to make Photoshop-esque pictures of themselves, you know, and we say any picture that you upload, the same story we've been peddling for decades now, anything you upload is available on the internet. You know, even if people tell you we won't share it, we're not going to have that, that's not necessarily the case. So that's what I would say.
Thank you.
I'm gonna. I think you called yourself Sandy. Is that right? I would hate to get it wrong again.
Yeah. Just get Tandy. I need to change it one day.
Tandy.
Yeah, Tandy from Northumbria Healthcare. I just
Hi.
attended an interesting RCN, it's a Royal College of Nursing webinar. They were talking about really giving the right tools to junior nurses or like student nurses on how to use AI to get the best out of it. My curiosity is, do you use the similar system on really directing the students on the right tools on how to use it? And also really what level of support do they need from parents? And coming from that neck of the woods, like working around that area, I do understand there's a high level of health literacy. The level of health literacy is very low around Blythe, and also accessibility to the, you know, to the technology. How do you combat some of those challenges?
Yeah, I think that's really important to discuss as well, the fact that not only are we combating the big myths and mythos of society, but also we've got a massive, we're in a massive area of digital deprivation as well. Some students will not have access at home, some parents may not have access at home. So how do we combat that? Firstly, I'm very blessed that in my school we've got a number of IT facilities that we make available to students. So we make sure that even before school, after school, at any available time that we can do, we make sure that all students have access to that. There are specific arrangements where we can provide students with hardware as well if they want to go off and use some of it at home, but we always make sure that no student it falls victim to that digital divide. On top of that, the very boring but very powerful answer, what I would say to the parents, is education. The next stage in our plan is making sure that parents understand what are the myths and the truths of AI and how this benefits the modern world. I had a very, very interesting conversation with a parent who wanted to ring up and ask about AI and what we're teaching about it, because they had a personal stake and they thought that their livelihood was under threat from AI. They were in an administrative role, and so that I was already combating a bias there. I think making sure that all homes are aware of this and inviting parents in so they can ask questions and get a first-hand handle, especially within our community, as you say, is really paramount. In regards to the prompt part of your question, that's an area that we're looking at for future progression. And I think beforehand we mentioned the word hallucinations, where AI can take massive amounts of data and effectively make things up, whether it's statistics or images or videos. There are a number of things that AI can just generate based on the information it has and kind of fill in the blanks there. So actual prompt writing itself is something that we need to look into further with students to make sure that they've got a good handle on it. We are sending them out into the modern world where AI is going to be a fundamental part, especially if it continues the trajectory it currently has. So that's something that we need to explore further, I would say. That's a really good point.
Thank you, Tandy. Are there any other questions before we move on to the next? Chris?
Yes, I was very interested to hear how you had embedded the use of AI with your staff, and clearly that was very thorough, and you are a computer science department, so you would expect you to do that. You then said also as well you were working on a academy trust policy, and I just wondered how transferable is what you have done to departments that aren't as IT savvy as you are and don't understand AI as much as you do? And how can you make sure that those checks and balances are in place in policies that would go trust-wide?
So for the full policy, we're looking at a group of representatives from across the trust to make sure that it's not just contextual to our school. In regards to rolling this out to other departments, that's our next step. We know that we are well placed at the moment in computer science, and effectively, if anybody's got the knowledge, it's probably going to be us. So as the second phase, which we're currently about halfway through, we decided to choose a subject that was completely polar opposite as best we could find. We went with geography and religious studies. The reasons being their questionings and their type of questions that they have, especially for their exam boards, are completely different to ours. For computer science, a lot of ours is based on the answer is X, or this is the answer. It's very much this is it. There are some essay-based questions in there, but not to the same level as those subjects. To make sure that staff are not only quality assured but comfortable with it, I met with heads of departments and made sure that they understood exactly what the terms were of AI. And then we asked them questions. Instead of us coming just from a top down and saying, this is how we use it, this is how you should use it, we asked, where are the big tasks? Where are the big things in your department where you might want to save time? What are the repetitive tasks that we see over and over? And based on those repetitive tasks, we came up with a plan, because it's not just about applying our model and just fitting it on top of other departments. It's about utilizing it, as we've said, as a tool. What would work for you? What would really benefit and increase efficiency within your department? In which case we listened, I had a conversation with them, and we've put in place a couple of different things for them to try. Based on the things that they are trying, we are then quality assuring it. In our policy, we've made sure that there is going to be somebody across the trust who is going to have that autonomy when it comes to AI. Within the different departments, as it should be, and I strongly believe this, the head of department is going to facilitate the rolling out of AI within their department. They may choose, if they so desire, to say, we're going to use it minimally, if at all. And some staff might not like that. But in the past, there's been departmental decisions that have been made, and it's up to you to drive behind your line manager. Now, across the trust, we actually have an AI lead at Bede. So this is a member of staff, and it's his job to really refine these different models, to liaise with other members of the trust in those leadership positions and make sure that they're actually getting what they need. There's no point us putting time, effort, and energy into creating this policy, giving it over, and then saying, right, off you go, you use it. Because if staff aren't trained and they don't know what the dangers are, it might not benefit them in the long run at all.
Thank you.
You're very good at this, Tom, aren't you? Helen.
Sorry, I was curious about your AI lead. That sounds really good, because we've got policies in place, obviously, because we've got quite a few doing this apprenticeship. But so if somebody was creating a model, would they have to go via the AI lead and just check it was safe and secure? And I'm just thinking I might put it towards our team.
I think we need to build up to that point. At the moment, the AI lead is the person who is kind of facilitating the structure of the models being developed. So he's, if you may not have guessed it, he's in my department at the moment. We're both part of this policy group, and effectively he comes with the know-how and the knowledge. We've, in our department, all had a bit of a dabble, but he's well trained, and I've made sure that he's gone on the kind of cutting edge courses that have been developed by the big industries to make sure that he's genned up on prompts, hallucinations, ring fencing, like you've said. When he comes back and he's created these models, he works as my right hand when I'm discussing with heads of department what they're trying to do. And effectively, he goes, it can do this, it can't do this. Now, We're not quite at the stage yet, because it's still in its infancy, to where other departments are making their own models yet, but that will fall under his responsibilities. I'd like to get to a point, and this is a bit of a double-edged sword, where departments are making high quality moral models that work for them. But I'd also like it to be at a point where he wouldn't have to quality assure them, and he's there more of a consultant rather than this overbearing AI overlord. That being said, his role is making sure that AI is rolled out effectively across the trust and safely too. So yes, I imagine that will come under it. We're just not at that stage yet.
Oh, that'd be really interesting. I'll talk to our IT team about that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So I put together a few questions for this webinar, but the conversation has gone so well and so deep that a lot of them have already been covered for the next section. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to reword a question in this way, Tom. So if you imagine a continuum between very poorly to perfectly, where would you say, how would you think students are currently using the AI, both necessarily potentially in your school and maybe bigger picture across all schools? That might be a difficult question to answer, the second part. But where are we on this journey, would you say, in terms of making AI work best for student sort of usage?
Very poorly. In a way. Just at the moment. At the moment, what we're looking at is this kind of surface level idea of AI, which is I put in my essay question, it writes an essay, and I copy and paste it. That's kind of the numb fear that not only staff have, but parents have as well. And when I say poorly, I don't just mean about the applications of students who might be trying that. And it's not just students, there'll be people all over different industries doing that. There was a newspaper that printed an article, and at the very bottom of it, it said, would you like me to put this into bullet points? And somebody just copied and pasted it straight across from ChatGPT. So it's not just within schools. The reason that many students are using it poorly is not the moral or lack of morals application when it comes to answering homework. It's that, and this is a discussion that we've touched on previously, it's the levels of prompts that they're asking. We're finding very surface level prompts. Please answer this question. What is the answer to this? And they only dig so far. This is a massive language learning model. That's what it does. It looks for these patterns. And in the same way, when you go onto Google and you type something in and you search for it, lots of people don't know about the Boolean operators that you can use to kind of refine those searches that you do. Most people put something in. If it's not on page 1, you might think about going to page 2, but a lot of people will actually just change what they're looking for rather than going through 10 or 20 different Google pages. So what we do need to do is make sure that students are trained on prompts. What's something that hadn't really occurred to me until recently is a member of staff is going on holiday to America. And what he's doing, because he's very similar to me, and if you haven't guessed from the voice, I'm from Yorkshire, so I don't really like spending a lot of money. He works on AI tools that have so many tokens. So every day you have 4 tokens, you have 4 prompts to use, and it's going to generate a high quality answer. What he's actually doing on his trip to America is he's using one AI to develop prompts for the other one. So he's spending his tokens in Claude, and it's refining it to such a level that it's actually planning a good itinerary for him. But it's doing it to such a high level of prompts that he's effectively stacking AI on top of each other. Now, that's a much better application, but I still don't think we're quite there. These prompts need to be used really effectively, and there still needs to be a level of quality assurance. The worst thing we can do is generate an answer from AI and take it at face value. There needs to be some level of, is that right? Some questioning. Does this look about right? How can I make sure this is accurate? And again, it's the same systems that have been around for years and years. It's the people sharing things on social media that have been put from random bots and things that people have made up because they want to see what kind of things they do. How do we quality assure it? What's the reputable source? And those are the things that we need to put into place. As far as other schools are getting on, I think there's a large spectrum, if I'm honest there. There are some schools that are saying, nope, we're not getting involved in that. That's not something that we want to do. We don't acknowledge AI. We don't want our students using it. because sometimes with something this unwieldy, and I understand this, it's just easier to say blanket no, because there's so many grey areas of AI when it comes to this. It's difficult to know where to go, especially with how rapidly it's moving. I had to have a frank discussion with the exam board, because in my coursework that we do at A level, my students develop social media posts, and they do fake posts, and it's all very design work and creative. But ultimately, the marks come from analysing, evaluating the posts they've made, not the posts themselves. So I spoke to the exam board and I said, we're able to generate much higher quality posts with the use of AI. We're not saying that these posts are original developments by the students. We're not putting anything out there, because that's the benchmark of our plagiarism and copyright policy, isn't it? You're absolutely within your rights to take something on board and say, I'm going to use this in my essay, but I'm going to acknowledge that this isn't my original work. It's when you start putting things forward that's developed by AI or an author or an illustrator or somebody else as your own work, that's when we get into those hot waters. And I spoke to the exam board and they said, that's absolutely fine. Now we've got to this point, as long as you reference it, as long as you put this in your bibliography, and we put in the site, we put in the prompt that was used, and we put in the date that was accessed, all information to basically say, here you go, we're not putting this forward as our own original work. The exam board were more than happy. There are some places, however, and I can see where this can cause a bit of confusion, that can actually undermine what schools are trying to accomplish. I know that some application for universities, they've encouraged the use of AI, and they've said, if you're going to use AI, make sure that you hit these points. Well, we don't want that at my centre. We think that write your own personal statement is an incredibly useful tool and skill to be able to develop. We don't want students to just rely on AI tools to generate a beautifully worded essay that really isn't them. So we make sure that we kind of steer students away from that as well. And that's even before we get into the ideas of AI checkers. And this is where the problem comes, because AI checkers at the moment are not very good. In the way that AI looks for patterns and pattern recognition, AI checkers, they're not great. There's no secret signature at the very bottom that AI leaves saying, this is AI. All right, if you're an AI checker, I'm letting you know that this was generated. There's nothing like that. We've had original pieces of work developed by students, and we've put them into separate checkers. One's come up with 6% of this is developed by AI, and statistically, we've got to come up with a threshold. In the same way that I might write a sentence in my work and somebody's already developed that train of thought, there might be an overlap. But we've put the same piece of work into another checker, and it says it's 70% generated by AI. And you'll have to excuse me because I am still on school grounds, so that will be the bell. So in regards to this, there's not that consistency there yet. There are even some tools that I know they're trialing in America where it actually records the screens of students as they're typing. And when you're checking their work, you can fast forward to see the rate at which they're typing the words, and if it's more human, or does it look like it's just been block copied and pasted. Now, this doesn't stop students from having it there in front of them. So the best way that we have to deal with this is, again, the quality assurance. This is a really hard thing for schools to tackle, because we want them to know this skill, but we want them to use it morally, and we want them to not forego that learning experience as a result of that. The only way we can do that, as I've come, if I come back to my original point, is quality assuring it, making sure that when we speak to students, can they describe and discuss with us what they actually say they can? If they can, great. If they can't, maybe we need to dig a little bit deeper about where they're getting that information.
Thank you very much, Tom. One thing that caught my attention, and it's not a surprise, was mentioning that schools are completely on their own continuum as well, in terms of some schools are like, AI doesn't exist, we're not touching that. Other schools are fully embedded. I imagine in the staff room, it's a similar situation, and there'll be some teachers and some departments who are less enthusiastic than others. How do you cope when you have, dealing with almost a 2 or 3 tier system within a school, whereby some departments are fully on board, others are dead against it? how do you ensure that there's some sort of consistency of thought and development when teachers are being worked hard? Work-life balance is a thing for teachers as well, and a lot of teachers will turn around thinking, I haven't got time for this.
This is a massive thing, and this comes within the really micro digital divide of something as small as a school. I know that if we take that example of the homework, where my staff is generating these fantastic homework resources for these students on the low stakes questions, especially if they're doing this on a weekly basis. If there's a department in my centre and they look at them and go, how is he doing that? Like, how has he got the time to do that? I find that incredibly unfair, and that's something that I want to combat against. So much so, me with my sharp elbows, we've got a bit of pride of place when it comes to our inset training day on September, and myself and the AI lead are going to stand up there and make sure that all staff are aware of what AI can do for them when used properly and when used morally as well. Because it would genuinely break my heart to be, rooms away from a member of staff who is really struggling with something that AI could do and make their life better. And that's the thing, it's not replacing the time. Teachers are still going to have to utilize their time somewhere. But instead of writing these documents for 4 hours, let's quality assure for 45 minutes. Is this accurate? Does this make sense? Does this go with what we've learned? So in answer to your question, I'd make sure that staff are firstly aware of what AI can do. And secondly, I'd make sure that we speak to all heads of departments when the time comes. Make sure that if they want to use AI, or if they don't, it's because they're informed about it, not because they're scared or they're unsure or they just feel like they don't know what to do with it. If they've got all the background information and they still refuse to use it, that's absolutely fine. At least they've made an informed decision.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the floor? I love Helen. Immediately hand up.
Sorry.
No, it's great.
No, as they do this AI apprenticeship, it is a government initiative from what I gather, and we've got on the cohort, there's people from all across the UK, from businesses, and they want to get everybody up to that AI standard. So I just wondered, have you heard anything about it being rolled out more in schools to be taught? Because I think you're ahead of the curve, really. You're doing so well, and
thank you. I came across this at one of the AI consortiums that I visited, and I looked into it, and it looked really interesting because of the pace of how we're moving in the school. And I was really passionate to get ahead of this. I still might undertake it, and I still might ask my staff to undertake it. In fact, that might be something that we mention on Inset, especially for those staff who aren't quite as au fait with it, or maybe need a little bit more direction. I think it would be really wise to get that knowledge out there. We decided not to do that, not because we didn't think it was valuable, but because we wanted to put our time and effort into our policy, and it's highly contextual. So our thought process was, if we were spending 3 hours doing this type of assignment for the government initiative, we'd rather spend the 3 hours trying to refine the policy. So when other staff who have done that actually get on board and they say, right, let me at it, what can I do? At least then we've got something to say, well, here's the policy, it's been confirmed by the trust, here's what you can do and what you can't do. But I still think it's something that I'll look into, because it's always nice to know what the government wants you to know, what other industries want you to know. It's good to have a handle on that, and that's something that we found out when we're looking at AI. It's why I've sent the lead off on all these different training things. We first started doing it solely in education, but we found that everybody was almost looking around and going, well, what do you know? Well, what do you know? Sharing this information. And that's good to an extent, but we know that the private industries are well ahead of us. So by sending him there, he can come back and say, this is what they're doing next. This is what we're expecting. So yes, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I think that's something that I'll put in the inset day for sure.
Thank you, Helen. What we like to do, go on, be quick, Chris.
It's an observation, really, rather than a question. There are massive implications, aren't there? Fast forward 5 years, and if the pace remains the same, massive implications for the training of new teachers. you know, and who is going to train them? Because if the school workforce and school leaders are struggling themselves with getting to grips with it and forming policies and implementing it in the classroom, then, you know, who is going to train the new teachers who are coming in? It's just an observation. Be interesting to know what you would think about that, Tom.
We're finding some new issues in education anyway. There was a large shift to collaborative working and collaborative learning a number of years ago. I mean, this has been going on behind closed doors for years, but it was brought into the spotlight whereby staff were encouraged to make these centralized resources, and then staff would go and adapt these based on the cross-section of their classes. What we're finding now, and it's not just in centres here, but across the nation, is that new teachers are struggling to develop things from nothing because they've gone into an area where there's developed resources already. Their training has been heavily dependent on adapting rather than creating. So in terms of AI, it's a very similar conversation. It's a how do we roll this back? How do we kind of go back to the bare bones of what you should know, and how do we make sure that your training is high quality? And it comes back down to that same thing again. Who's quality assuring this? What metrics are we using, and how do we ensure, how are we convinced that these teachers that are coming into the profession have the skill set that we need? There are a number of things that I've seen where people are using AI prompts in interviews. And if I was on a video call, as remote working has just boomed, especially over the last 5 to 10 years, there are now interviewers who demand that you share your screen. If I shared my screen with you right now, you would see a reflection back of everything we've got. But what you wouldn't be able to see is my phone at the side. Maybe I could put that on a stand here, and all the conversation that we're having, I've trained a model or a prompt that whatever questions you asked, it beautifully creates me a perfect answer based on obscure research and things that nobody else could pull together. So that quality assurance and that hiding, and I want to be really clear about this, we're not trying to catch people out. What we're trying to do is just make sure that people are doing exactly what they say they can do. And there's nothing wrong with that. We speak to our students a lot about this. There's no point in going to culinary school and university and doing all these wonderful things and having certificate after certificate on your wall saying what a fantastic chef you are if you can't fry an egg, if you can't make me something. You've got to be able to do this. And I don't feel attacked by this, but I think there's a big stem of moral application that comes with AI. In the same way that when I took this job and I had to ask, I was asked the question, can I code? And I said, yes, I can. I've done years of it at university. They said, great, here's a task, go away and code it. They had to do that. It was quality assurance on me putting my money where my mouth is. Can I do this? In the same way that new teachers coming into the profession are saying, I can teach well. Fantastic. Let's see it. And that's something that AI might, in some maybe immoral applications, try and undermine. But all I see is we flip that. What happens there is the people who say they can walk the walk, they actually can.
Thank you for the excellent question, Chris, because it actually led on nicely, because we like to finish our webinars thinking about the future, thinking about what next, and that really leads into it nicely. So I guess I've got some questions. I'm just going to ask 4 questions at once, Tom, and I want you to pick out your best parts of whatever you want to say there. So we're thinking about how do we prepare young people for the world where AI is becoming commonplace. So we've talked about new teachers having to deal with this, etc. But when students leave education and they're into the real world, you know, what skills will become more valuable? You know, what skills will become less important? You know, what are employers looking for? And why does adaptability even, why does that matter? A lot there, just to pick out your favourite.
I think, and this is something that we discussed before, James, on our first meeting. The fear that comes with AI is that it's going to take and take. When actually what it's going to do is it's going to shine a spotlight on the things that it can't do. Because it's prolific and because it's everywhere, because this automation, this pattern recognition is able to take massive amounts of information and create this beautiful picture or this essay or answer, whatever it might be, that's really nicely packaged up for someone to use. all it does is shine a light on the things that make us human. And that's going to be one of the best things about being a human in this AI world, where if we've got companies and we've got industries that look for that repetitive nature, and I'll put my hands up and say it's that stark repetition, the same way that when we saw the Industrial Revolution come in and do those repetitive tasks over and over, then we had the digital revolution, repetitive tasks over and over. AI is just doing the next level up. In the same way the calculator replaced the abacus. We've seen these generational shifts before, but what it does do is it shows really what makes us special. Humans are messy, we're chaotic, and we can adapt. All things that AI has consistently shown it's no good at. It can do these large things that are based on patterns, but life isn't based on patterns, not always. Yes, there are some little flickers of calmness and some things that can follow, but a lot of the times during our day, there'll be things that we've got to adapt to. There'll be things that aren't going exactly the way we need them to, and AI can't do that very well at all. A study was done in America where they replaced an entire department in industry and administration with AI, the entire department. And what they wanted to see is all these people saying, AI is going to take my job. AI is going to replace me. How much did they find? What percentage did they find actually was done over, I think it was a month and a half that they took. And they found that when they replaced the entire department with automated AI, it had the same efficiency of 4%. 4% was all AI could muster, because a massive amount of everybody's day is adapting to the unknown. Well, unknown, there's no patterns for the unknown. There's things that have happened before. There's things that we can look at and draw experience from. But really, the messiness and the chaos of everyday life, that's our strength now. AI can do these repetitive things, but our strength is in the unknown. And that's what's really exciting. So when we look at what are we going to send our students into the modern world with, it's the knowledge that, yes, repetitive tasks might be given over to software like AI, in the same way that we've got cars instead of horse and carts, the same way we've got, as I've said, calculators instead of the abacus. Have we replaced humans yet? Absolutely not. Are we going to replace humans? Absolutely not. So what skills are going to develop? We haven't had a chance to discuss the new jobs that AI are creating. The fact that actually a new profession of prompt writing, people are making money from developing high quality prompts and selling them on. People are making money by training others. My AI lead, he has got a promotion because of AI. It's creating jobs too. The difference now comes in those high quality skilled jobs of how do we tap into that? How do we automate these things? How can we make it so that our students are prepared to take advantage rather than be on the losing end of this AI revolution? Now, I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on too much, but what we think is coming next is grand monetization. In the same way that, and I don't mean to be a bit grim as we finish off, drug dealers of yesteryear would give out free samples to get people hooked and then add on a price tag when people come back for more. We think this might be coming next in industry if we're not careful. Already we're seeing a large movement financially in that AI sector. We're seeing some things that have been lost when it comes to hardware. And what we're seeing now quite quickly is the new age of students coming out and going, actually, we're a bit bored of this now. I've always said the worst thing that could ever happen to me was to win the lottery. Don't get me wrong. If you offer me the numbers, I'll take them without a question. But we all like to aspire to things. And when we look at things like films and media and illustrations and all this wonderful creativity that we've got, if I told my 10-year-old self that I could have Transformers meeting the cast of Lord of the Rings and they're going to fight off on the Death Star, you'd have blown my mind. Now it's only a prompt away. I've got everything I want, and now it's a bit boring. And what we're finding is that our students feel exactly the same way. If you can have everything that you've ever wanted at your fingertips, now what? Now what do we do? And actually this creates a moral conversation, because it's not an application of what do I want? It's what can we apply this to? Where's the good in this? And that's where that moral thread that we're really keen on here at my school,
Thank you so much, Tom. I think if you were there to narrate our journey through AI going forwards, I think the world would be in a much better place, because you just make things straight, you make them sound right, they work with what our mind is thinking. And yeah, we're very grateful for the time you spent with us today, so thank you. I'm very conscious of the fact you're at school and it's 3 minutes to go until 1 o'clock, so I'm going to end this conversation very, very shortly, as much as I'd like to continue it. What I would say is a couple of things. Tom and I have been talking about doing a future webinar series relating to AI and looking at other elements of AI that would be of interest. So we've got some ideas. We're looking into teaching and learning in the age of AI. We're thinking about preparing young people for jobs that don't exist yet, which we've kind of alluded to already. Parents, social media and AI is a big issue. Is that something we should be delving into? And AI communities and the future of the North is another conversation we're looking to have. So in the chat, if you would be interested in just putting any ideas you've got or any suggestions you've got for what we should be talking about next, please do so, because we would very much like to continue this conversation. It's a conversation that's going to be uploaded onto YouTube, so we're going to have a lot of people looking at this, hopefully. And then when we do the second or even the third one, we will find some really interesting conversations that will come out of this. But I'm going to stop talking now, because I'm very aware that the bell's about to ring for Tom. So can I please thank Tom so much for coming on to this conversation today. Thoroughly enjoyable. I'd like to thank everybody for attending and for contributing so well to the conversation as well. I've got one quick bit of PR to do, which I will share in the chat now. So we are doing, we had a big conference in Manchester on Friday the 12th of June, and it was all about the Do With event, and we're basically creating a Do With momentum which incorporates and invites all organisations, community organisations and everyone to basically sign up to a charter where people agree and commit to doing with rather than doing to people. And it's the idea that people are working together, listening to communities, listening to what the people are saying on the ground, and ensuring this is actually going to ensure that better answers and better responses are found in work that happens at all levels. We're having a second online session on the 16th of July, 17th of July, I think it is actually, the Friday. Excuse me. Yeah, 17th of July. So I put it in the chat, a little introduction to that. If you'd like to come involved in that, we'd very much appreciate it. But I'm going to stop the conversation now, because it is 1 o'clock and I don't want to get told off by the head teacher. So thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, everybody, and have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.